Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a single, really unsettling question. It's a story that starts with something as common as the pill you might take or the water you drink, and it ends with a potential species-level consequence that, honestly, very few of us have ever stopped to consider.
So, there it is. That's the core question of this entire explainer. Is our tap water causing involuntary childlessness? It's a provocative thought, isn't it? It forces us to look at something we completely take for granted, the water from our taps, in a totally new and, frankly, pretty disturbing light.
This is the quote that really kicked off this whole line of thinking. It's from a source named Beatrice, and it draws this incredibly stark line, connecting a technology that was designed for personal choice to a massive, unintended consequence for our entire species.
Okay, Section 1, a question in the water. So let's really break this down. How on earth does something as personal as contraception become a planetary-scale problem? Well, it all starts with a simple biological process.
Now, the crucial point to get here is that the main problem isn't people flushing old pills down the toilet. I mean, that happens, but it's not the big issue. The real issue is that our bodies don't fully metabolize a lot of the drugs we take. The remnants are then excreted, they pass right through most of our water treatment plants, and they create this constant, low-level feed of these incredibly powerful chemicals into our entire water system.
All right, Section 2, Science of a Silent Signal. Now, I know this might be starting to sound a little like science fiction, but the core idea is actually grounded in well-established science. It all comes down to what happens when these chemicals interact with living things.
The science really revolves around this concept called endocrine disruptors, and a lot of pharmaceuticals, especially the hormonal ones, fall right into this category. The best way to think of them is like signal jammers for the body. They interfere with our hormone system, which is basically the master regulator for almost everything. Development, reproduction, metabolism, you name it.
And just to be crystal clear, these effects aren't just theories. They are documented, observable facts in wildlife. This so-called feminization of male fish, for example, is a classic and pretty alarming case of endocrine disruption that is happening in our rivers and lakes right now.
And this, of course, is the question you just can't avoid. If this is happening to fish, what about us? We're not separate from our environment. So if these chemicals are potent enough to literally rewrite the biology of fish and amphibians, it's not a huge leap to start asking what the subtle, long-term effects might be on people.
And the thinking in the source material expands even further. See, since that same endocrine system also regulates our metabolism, it leads to another pretty intriguing question. Could our constant low-level exposure to these disruptors be a hidden factor in the global obesity epidemic?
Okay, moving into Section 3, the rogue agent simulation. To really wrap your head around the scale of this problem, the analysis proposes a really powerful analogy. I want you to imagine our entire biosphere, the whole living world, is a giant computer system, and we've just accidentally unleashed a piece of rogue code into it.
This model just illustrates the problem so brilliantly. These chemicals act like a piece of rogue software. First, they have an active payload. That's the powerful code designed to hijack the body's endocrine system. Second, they have no TTL, or time to live, which in tech means it never expires. Biochemically, it means they are incredibly stable and just don't break down. And third, we're in a state of continuous deployment. We are constantly adding more of this stuff to the system every single day.
So if you run this simulation forward, it reveals 3 massive cascading failures. First up, the fertility crash. The rogue agent does what it was designed to do. It disrupts reproduction. This leads to what the source calls rising involuntary childlessness, which then pushes population rates below the stable replacement level, and eventually that can trigger a full-on demographic collapse.
But then there are the unintended side effects. Cascade number 2 is the metabolic breakdown. The same hormonal chaos starts messing with how our bodies manage energy, which could contribute to skyrocketing rates of obesity and diabetes. The systemic consequence of that, healthcare systems get totally overwhelmed by a chronically ill population.
And the third cascade brings it all back to where we started, the environment. By hitting the most sensitive species at the very bottom of the food chain, those fish and amphibians, the agent triggers an ecosystem collapse. This threatens the basic services we all depend on for survival, clean water, stable food webs. And that creates this terrifying feedback loop where the problem just gets worse and worse.
Okay, Section 4, a diagnosis of hubris. So, if the potential outcome is this terrifying, you just have to ask, how did we let this happen? The analysis points to a kind of deep philosophical blind spot.
The argument is that this whole mess is the result of what the source calls the twin hubris of the 20th century. On one side, you've got Homo sapiens exceptionalism, this belief that we're somehow separate from nature, that we can mess with biology without consequences. And on the other side, industrial risk externalization, which is really just a fancy way of saying we built an economic system that's designed to push the real costs of our actions, like pollution, onto someone else, namely the future.
And when you put those two ideas together, you get what our source calls a cannibalistic engine, consuming the future to fuel the present. It's a pretty brutal image, isn't it? A system that needs constant growth, while at the same time it's destroying the very biological foundation for the future people needed to sustain that growth.
So the really crucial point here isn't about evil people plotting our destruction. It's something much more insidious. The source argues it's a system of hyper-specialization and willful blindness. Think about it. A doctor is trained to treat the patient sitting in front of them, not the entire city's water supply. A pharmaceutical company has a legal duty to its shareholders not to protect ecosystem stability 100 years from now. Everyone is just a cog in a machine that's designed to be blind to its own systemic consequences.
And this brings us to our final and maybe most sobering section, Section 5, the verdict of tomorrow. How will future generations, if they manage to weather this storm, how will they judge our time?
And the source material is unflinching here. It speculates that history's judgment could be incredibly harsh. It suggests that a particular strain of feminism might be criticized for embracing what it sees as a flawed technological fix without seeing the bigger picture. It says the medical and pharmaceutical complex could be seen as committing a profound breach of the highest trust, and that the fossil fuel industry might be viewed as the architects of the entire fever dream.
And we'll leave you with this final, just devastating summary of the problem from the source. The ultimate tragedy is that we built a world that we could not survive in, and called it progress. It really forces us to ask if our entire definition of progress has been a terrible mistake. It's a question that just hangs in the air, a lot like the silent signals in our water.